Hi, welcome to learning SocketCluster and Vue.js with Nick Kotenberg. In this episode, we're going to learn the structure of SocketCluster, the structure of Vue.js, and how to build a very simple app. Let me show you about as basic as you can get app. So let's start it up. I use Gulp, and we'll go over why in a minute. So see SocketCluster started up here. There we go, and we have our let me show you real quick what my system is. HTOP. I have 8-core i7 with 16 gigs of RAM. So you can see it detects that I have 8 cores, spins up 8 workers with a broker that manages communication between the workers, and it gives us some SocketCluster information here, what's going on, what version and whatnot. Okay, so let's take a look. So we'll refresh, and there we go. And you can see going between pages. I had a little loading screen there. Okay, so what's going on here? There's actually a lot going on. This is not the best example because it's so simple, but I wanted to start with simple and go to complex. So let's start with SocketCluster first. Let me show you what a base installation looks like. So you can get SocketCluster with npm. So obviously you need to install Node. So go to Node.js, grab 4.4. At my work we use 5.11, but there's some reasons behind that. 5.11 is not supported anymore, and you probably won't need that. It's because one of the packages we use requires at least 5, and one of the packages we also use doesn't work with 6. So we're stuck in between. Anyway, but I suggest you start with 4.4, but 6.3 works pretty well with SocketCluster as long as you're not using older packages. Okay, so install Node. I'm not going to go over all that sort of stuff because this video is focused on SocketCluster and Node. If you have any questions, I'll make a video for you on how to do that. Okay, so we're assuming you have Node installed. So, see Node, npm install SocketCluster globally, like so. I already have a SocketCluster installed, so it's not actually going to install here. But, oops. Well, I have to do a super user, so bang, bang. And then here we go, like so. Give it a second to run. And come on. There we go. Okay, so let's create a new directory. SocketCluster cluster create. We'll just do the my app example that's done in the documentation. By the way, documentation for SocketCluster is, I already have one open. It's right here, socketcluster.io. Create an app, and we will grab that guy. Where's my app at? My app, there we go. You'll see it starts to build it on the fly. We can do my app, and then node server.js, port 8000. So go localhost. Oops. I did that. There we go. And 8000. There we go. Basic SocketCluster app. Okay, so SocketCluster comes with the server, like so, server file. This is your main process right here. And then your worker here. And this is the definition for each worker. So if you have 8 cores, then it will spin up 8 of these, hence the module exports. Okay, and then your broker, this manages communication between the workers. This installation to me is, I think, overly complex. I really appreciate all the hard work by the SocketCluster team, but I kind of wish they would have made this a little simpler, because I think for a new user it's a little bit daunting. But I'll go over and show you how to make this nice and simple. And also Docker, if you're a Docker fan, not my cup of tea, but you teach their own. And then you can see all the packages that come with SocketCluster initially. Just quite a bit. Okay, so let's break this down and see what's going on. Okay, so on the worker, we'll see it runs, and SocketCluster uses Express on the back end, you can see here. So when a request comes in, it says, hey, look at the public folder and use whatever HTML file you see. Here's index.html, and here is the HTML for this page. You can see SocketCluster design is not what it looks like, what it feels like, blah, blah, blah. And here's the page. Okay, all right. You can also see that SocketCluster also spins up your WebSockets for you. Okay. All right, now let me show you what I do with this. It's a little bit different. I tend to use Gulp, so you'll see I remove the server file. I call the SocketCluster library directly, and then I build it with my Gulp task. Now this is more complex than you need to do, but I like to kind of build everything modular, so I can minify my files, I can do a check on my JavaScript files, I can unclify them all in one command, build templates, reload, that sort of stuff. Okay. You don't actually need all this, so let's just do like so for now, just to show you how simple it can actually be. We could just use all this junk like this. We're not going to be doing it in production. We don't need SSL. Your app can actually just be as simple as this. You actually don't even need most of this junk. This you don't need, and really any of that. So this is a kind of a basic SocketCluster server setup. Now this is obviously going to fail because some other stuff is requiring some of the things that are spun up here. But either way, you can see how simple it can be. Okay, so let's take it back. So what's happening here is on Gulp will look for default. The default tasks runs templates, the template file, and then the start server. Okay, templates is we use Jade in this series. You can use HTML, you can use whatever you want, EJS, it doesn't matter to me. But in this series, we're going to use Jade. So I build my templates, which is a JavaScript file that I pass down to the server. So it's super fast processing. We do everything client side for the most part, and then after templates is done, we start the server. The server runs minify, so it minifies the JavaScript files. So when we send them back to the client, they're nice and minified and uglified and clean. And then we tell what environment we're running in, and then we build SocketCluster here. Okay, so I run everything through my env file. So you can see here that I have a sample env file, and on get I ignore the actual env file for when I set it up. So I believe my password is in my env file, so I'm not going to show it to you, but my env.sample in here, you can just imagine this filled out: database name, username, password, whether we're minifying or not, the Reddit's address, this sort of stuff, right? Okay. So there we go. You can see you can sort of see how the server works here. Okay, and then the worker over here, you'll see on the server. What I missed it. Gulp file. There we go. You'll see that we grab the OS here. We grab how many CPUs, and then the length, and that's how many workers we spin up. In my case, 8. Okay. So then I grab my env file again here, so you can load the env data, so we're not pushing up to GitHub or whatever version control we're using. We spin up MySQL pool, which is nice because pools are awesome. If you don't know what pools are, please post below, and I'll make a video series about it. But we're going to be focusing on this video series with SocketCluster and Vue.js. And then we're using Jade. This is where we serve all our files from, the public folder right here. Okay, and then we define our routes, which I'm not going to go over express routes. That's for another video. Okay, you can see we're doing everything from one file. The admin stuff we'll get into later. It's just a way for us to manage without our clients having access to any admin stuff. So home.js here, we'll see that it's just a get function on any route, on the default route here. You'll see the worker on any other route, we redirect to the default route, which is here. Also, you'll notice too, there's not authentication logins. We're going to do that client side, which is exciting. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that before. Really cool. Another functionality that SocketCluster gives you. We pass some basic data to the client, and then we render the Jade page. So home, Jade. I clicked the wrong one there. Doesn't matter. Our Jade. If you haven't seen Jade before, I think you'll like it. Nice and cool. No closing tags, so super cool. It's also space delimited. Okay. Well, that's tab delimited, right? So you'll see we go and grab a Bootstrap, because Bootstrap's a nice, easy way for styling. Obviously there's reasons to not use Bootstrap, but in this video series, I just wanted to quickly do some quick styling. Bootstrap 3. Then jQuery, even though we actually don't need jQuery at all, we're going to use it just to make some things easier. Because Vue.js with SocketCluster, handling all the components, you actually don't need jQuery at all. And outside of Vue, you really don't need JavaScript, which is pretty cool. You do everything inside Vue. And then we'll just do some basic toggle stuff, Bootstrap, JavaScript, we're grabbing Vue and the Vue Router because we're going to be using the Vue Router in this series. You can use Director or any other one you want, but in this video series, we're going to be using the Vue Router. We grab our SocketCluster file, which is our client-side way to connect through WebSockets back to our server. Our templates, which is our JavaScript templates for client-side processing. So you'll see it's just Jade. Our Vue model itself, and our dashboard. We're not using sessions yet. We'll get to that. Our settings file and the router itself. And that's why you'll see here we get those two pages. Now let's go take a look at the actual client side itself. Okay, so everything starts with the Vue model. If you don't know very much about Vue.js, I highly suggest going to Laracast and subscribing, because Laracast is PHP based, but Jeffrey Wade, the guy who runs the site, is really cool guy, and he always has so much more outside of PHP. So I suggest you go into his lessons out here. Where are the lessons at here? And Lord's Vue, right? These ones here. I highly suggest you go through and follow these videos. He does a great job. He doesn't handle it quite the way we do because he's using Laravel PHP framework. So what we're doing is a little bit different, but there's some good fundamentals you can learn from his video series. Okay, and also you can always use the Vue.js forums. So if you go into Vue.js, there is the forums are here somewhere. Community, the forum here. And also there's a chat too with, I believe Gitter, for their chat system. So you can always come in here and ask questions. Really cool. Okay. And it's very active, so there's always somebody in there. Even at like 4 in the morning, there's somebody in there. It's 2 in the morning now, and there was like 18 people there a minute ago. Okay, anyway. So Vue binds to an element in the DOM. Okay? So in this case, we're going to bind just to the body itself. Now, you can actually, in this Vue bind here, you can actually just put body if you want. Like that body, and it will bind directly to the body. But the Vue documentation suggests you don't do that for various reasons. And if you're curious about why, it's rather complex. You can go to the Vue.js forums and take a look. But here we're going to follow Vue.js conventions. Okay, so what's going on here? So as you see in the index file here, very first thing we load is the Vue file, which is this file here. So we create a router variable. We grab the new Vue router. We create an app extended, which is I'll get into this later. What's going on here? Everything in Vue comes from a Vue component, and you're building one right here. Okay. We create the new Vue. You can actually do this if you're not using the Vue variable. You can just create it like this if you want. But here I want to have access to the whole Vue for demonstration purposes. Okay, you can actually access every single component inside the Vue model, so you actually don't need to use this Vue variable. But I want to show you in the developer tools what's going on the back end, which is why I'm doing it this way. Or the back end of the client side, not back end server side. Okay, so then we instantiate some variables here. Okay, we'll get over what this is in a minute. And then we're not using a watch at the moment, so we can minimize that. We're not using methods at the moment. And then when the Vue component's built, it will run this function here. And we're using 2016 here. We grab the model. So when you say VM this, it's actually grabbing this whole component. So for example, if you do VM.completed, it's grabbing this variable here. Okay, you'll see this function here. If you do VM setup socket connection, it will actually run this function here. Okay, so you can see how you have access to everything, all your methods, what all these things are. We'll go into more detail. There's a lot more options for a Vue component, but we'll go into more detail later on. Okay, so up here we pass in the server address and the port. We grab that data using jQuery real quick. We set it. We remove it from the DOM because obviously don't want anyone to have access to that, and it's hidden anyways. But remove it from the DOM, and then we set completed to true. And the whole page shows. And then normally we'd set up the socket connection. We're not using WebSockets at the moment. Then as index files running through, we run through these scripts, which we're not going to go through quite yet. Then we run through the router. Okay, and the router is where all the communication between the pages go. When you click one of these buttons, it runs through the router. Okay. All right. Okay. Everything starts with this router before each. So remember in the Vue file up here, we instantiated a router object. Now we're going to define that router object and then start it and bind it to an element. Okay. So the very first thing we're doing is we're doing before each, which means before each change, we run this function, and then we go to the next, and then there's a series of things that run in the back, and we'll go over that in a minute. And then after the route's done, we run this function here. So see, we set a timeout and turn loading to false. Now, what's actually going on here? Vue has a way of binding data to the view itself. So let me show you what's going on here. Okay. So the very first thing we have is that image you saw. So you go and you click, right? You see this image flashing. Well, while loading, you see Vue show when loading is true. Well, loading starts out as true. Okay. Then it hits the router. It forces true because we want to make sure on every single route that it sets to true. And then once the route runs, it sets it to false. So we show and hide the image. Super cool. So Vue, as you can see, is data driven, which means you don't have to do all the jQuery stuff. You don't have to do show this, show, hide that, update it. You drive everything through the data. It's so cool. Okay, we can ignore some of the CSS styling. That's not important for this video. And then the source for the video, the image, obviously, is public images loading, right? Okay. Let me just do a basic Bootstrap nav bar, which if you're interested in Bootstrap, go here. I'm not going to go over it a whole lot, but you can go to Bootstrap and see the different components and everything that are available for Bootstrap. Anyway, okay. And then we say, okay, we're going to show this nav bar if the user is authenticated and it has completed loading and it's not loading the page. So what that means is on the index, we'll see that the only thing we're showing when it's not completed is the image, okay? Or when it's loading either way. And then we have, here's our router view, which this router view is where Vue injects the HTML, or in our case, Jade. Jade gets compiled to HTML and shoved in anyway, or processed into HTML and shoved in. Anyway, you get it, okay? So that's kind of the basic structure of how we're going to build our apps. Is we start a route, we show the image, we then process the route, and at the end we hide the image. Okay. What is it actually doing on this map? Well, let's go look at the default what we're going to call the dashboard, and then the settings page. You'll see in the index we included those here. So what do those look like? Well, let's go take a look. So on our JavaScript, we'll see it's JS, pages, and dashboard's the first one. So this is the most simple Vue component you can possibly think of. It just has a template. Okay. So all it's doing is taking this p tag dashboard and shoving it into this Vue router here, router view. And then when you click on the settings page up here, it's taking ignore this router view here. This is because this is a sub page for later on. It's taking this p tag here and shoving it into that same router view. You'll see as you click back and forth, you can see it go through the router before each, run the template, and then after each, and show the page, show the image. Now, I actually forced a delay on this router here because I wanted to show the image loading and what it looks like. Normally in a production app, there's no need for that. You can just directly set Vue loading false, but I'm going to keep it this way just because I think for demonstration purposes it helps show the transition of the app. Okay, so that's kind of a basic structure of a Vue app. You can see how from SocketCluster we use Express to serve the page, which is this index page right here. Okay, and don't worry, we're going to get more into this. I know it's a lot to take right in the beginning. We'll get into it. Don't worry. You'll serve this HTML page. We'll see how the browser processes the HTML, runs through, builds everything. It's hidden from the start. And then we run through all our scripts, grab all of our data we need. These will be shown later on what they are. We start the Vue model, which we can go back to here and look. This is the Vue model here with the router being instantiated and then obviously added to Vue. So you remember how I mentioned plugins later on? You can just add more plugins into here, whatever plugins you want to use. Anyway, oops. There you go. And then it keeps running, processing. It processes through the dashboard, the settings, the session file, which we'll get more into this later. And then it gets into the router as last. So we instantiate the map based on those variables that are available. Once again, you'll see we instantiated them as a variable here. And then we're assigning them here to these components. We're saying we don't need auth. and then we do before each. So every time a route gets passed, we run this function after each, and then we instantiate the router. That's how the app is run. And how we call those apps is through these hrefs. So Vue.js defaults to #bang for its route prefixes up here. If you go to the this is if you need the Vue Router. Vue Router. Oh, this is the GitHub. Oops. I'll just go directly to documentation here. Router.vuejs.org. We're obviously English. Well, I'm obviously English. You can choose to use vlinks, but I've had some trouble with vlinks, or you can just use #bang. I believe it is in. Where is the options? Router options. Here we go. You can change what you want, what route you want to use by route options, and that was where I showed you earlier. Up here in the Vue extend, you can put your options in here, and that's your options for your router. So you can change whether you want to show history or not. There's just a lot of things you can do. Save scroll position, transition on load, and we'll get over all that stuff later on. Okay, I know we've gone through a lot of stuff in the first video. I hope this wasn't too overwhelming, but I just wanted to show you a basic structure, a very, very, very basic Vue app, and kind of jump you in a little bit. Please, if you have any questions, please post in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe. Thanks guys so much, and look forward to hearing from you. And I'll see you in the next video.